Okay, so it's great to have you here. And I was looking on the internet to find a little bit of background for you, but there isn't much. There isn't much about where you grew up and where you went to school and what you studied. So, for the benefit of our viewers, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I guess someone needs to write me a Wikipedia page. I grew up I was born in a city called Albuquerque, in New Mexico, beautiful town in the mountains. But spent most of my years growing up outside of Houston, Texas, in sort of a classic suburb of America. Strip malls and movie theaters and schools on every corner, that kind of thing. And it was a very normal suburban kind of childhood, but except that my parents were scientists. All other kids' parents were, teachers and doctors and engineers and things like this. So whether or not I realized it early on, I was always around people who looked at the world in a particular way. Both my parents are in mathematics and computer science, but there's definitely always from very early on a value put on experiencing nature and tackling questions and figuring out problems in a particular way, and the value of reading and all of these things that these small curiosity driving behaviors that parents can instill in their children that you don't realize until you're much older. You're like, oh, and now that I'm a parent myself, I see what they were doing. I see that they were planting all of these seeds. Growing up in Houston, a wonderful big city with lots of opportunities, I was able to take part in some great school programs, as well as programs around school. And I remember one in particular that really planted the seed, or one of the first moments, at least, that I remember being like, I think this science thing is for me. There was a summer camp program at the city science museum, and part of this was dissecting animals, which is like, for a teen, like a mid-teenager, one of the coolest things you could possibly do. So we were dissecting, I think, a baby shark or a small shark of some kind, and I remember we were cutting open its stomach to figure out what organ was what. This is a little bit gory, but that's science. And inside was like a whole other fish that it had just eaten,
Okay.
and like a shrimp over here. And I'm like looking at the circle of life and carnage and really getting into it, while other people who were doing it were sort of interested but kind of grossed out. And I was like, give me more. This is so cool. I want to know how this part works. And what is this part? Do their eyes look different? How do their gills work? It's just, I had to unpack this thing. And I took other people's sharks and was like, let me see yours. So that was one of the first moments I remember being like, I think I look at this stuff maybe a little bit differently than other people I know. But when I went to college, this isn't uncommon to the U.S., but if you express an interest in science and you do well in school, which I done very well on my grades and stuff and exams, and the advisors tell you, well, have you thought about pre-medical programs? Maybe you should be a doctor. I was like, well, okay, if you say so. That seems to be the pathway that a lot of people who express interest in science early on are put on, and it's a wonderful pathway if that's what interests you. But for a while, I wasn't exposed to kind of the harder laboratory science, the more curiosity and kind of research driven science that I originally had sort of planted the seed. And midway through college, I decided that I didn't share the interests and motivations of a lot of the people in the pre-med programs. So I said, I'm going to go to just get a biochemistry degree, and I'm going to go into hard science. I'm going to be in a lab. I'm going to ask the questions, be doing the research that these doctors are going to be using later. And that's what I did. So coming out of my undergraduate degree, I I knew I wanted to go to grad school in some form, get some kind of a graduate degree, but there's so many choices. It's very hard to pick a subject, and you almost have to have a problem in mind, a domain in mind, whether they want to be developmental biology or chemical biology or drug design or neurobiology or whatever you have to know, at least narrow it down by that point. And I hadn't done that yet. And so I went and worked as a researcher, as a research assistant for a couple of years for a biotechnology company, working on major pharmaceuticals, and at a cancer hospital doing genetics research into to certain kinds of cancers, and got to taste and experience some different kinds of scientific research, and was able to narrow my goals down to kind of the next generation of genetics, and even looking into genetic engineering. So I joined a lab for a PhD program at the University of Texas that was working on some next generation genetics technologies, similar to CRISPR that everyone's heard so much about, but it didn't end up working as well as CRISPR, which is why I'm not a millionaire today, thanks to CRISPR. But we worked on a similar technology that we were hoping would give us the ability to kind of custom engineer DNA. And along the way, you do a lot of work to understand the basic nuts and bolts of that problem. So I worked with everything from stem cells to fruit flies to different kinds of bacteria, doing all the basic microbiology and molecular biology techniques. But then midway through graduate school, realizing again that there was something missing, that the purely doing the work in the lab wasn't fully satisfying everything I wanted to do. And as part of graduate school, teaching is involved. You end up being a teaching assistant, sometimes teaching full courses for undergraduates. And that was incredibly rewarding. And I really felt this fulfillment of being able to have that direct connection, especially for people who weren't necessarily getting a science degree, but getting to teach people who were getting a business degree, but this was the science class they got to take. Say, how can I instill a love of science in this person who thinks that they're never going to have to use it again, and show them that it will apply to every part of their life? That was so much fun to do in a classroom. And then at the same time, it was becoming very apparent, there's many challenges about about people questioning the value of science, whether we should be funding things the way we are, and if certain kinds of research were important. And science was a lot, kind of on defense, to a certain degree. So those two things combined, the need to teach and wanting to instill and show the value of science to the public, motivated me to start writing about it online. And I started my own Tumblr page, which is a very vintage thing these days, but it was like the hottest, coolest young social media platform of the time, and a place where people my age and who communicated like me online and spoke the same kind of internet language hung out. But nobody was really talking about science there. And so I decided, hey, I bet people care. I bet there's a ton of people here who want to hear about this, who are interested, but no one's talking to them. So I started talking to them, and it exploded in popularity. And I was so blown away at the response, and it showed that my hypothesis was right. There are tons and tons of people who love science and want to experience it and learn about it, whether or not they're going to be professional scientists. But the world has become so fragmented, and people are their attention is in so many different places, and they live and experience media in so many different places, that we have to go to them on these different platforms, and bring the science to them. And from there, I was able to do a training program for science journalism that's specially designed for graduate students. It's from AAAS. It's a major science society. It publishes the Journal of Science. And I worked at Wired magazine for 3 months to learn how to be a real science journalist writer. And right after I finished that, got a call from PBS asking if I wanted to try to launch a YouTube show. And I was like, well, I was going to do that anyway. I was just about to start my own YouTube channel. So let's do this. And that's how It's Okay to Be Smart was born. So since 2013, I've been kind of perfecting my craft and trying different things and learning along the way, just like anyone, and growing my audience and perfecting the craft of communicating science along the way.
And as you said, your parents planted the seed and made you a very curious person by nature. So, what do you think is the importance of being a curious person, and do you take it as a superpower?
So curiosity, I view as an openness to information, um, an openness to challenging answers and to replacing old information with new information that's better. And that is really actually I think a rare quality. It's not something that we're necessarily, well, I think we are born with it. I think we are born with it. Every child is curious. It's how the completely pure brain of a child learns. We're not born as blank slates or anything like that, but curiosity is, it exists in a very pure form in a young child. And it's so wonderful to see. But along the way, as we go through structures and we begin to ask different questions and proceed through school, that completely open curiosity is directed more at accomplishing this test or this problem or completing this assignment. And you begin to lose that freedom. And I think that what we see in the world today with the dangers of conspiracies and the continued questioning of basic scientific fact, and being able to, on a daily basis, filter out what is real and what is true versus what is not, and what somebody is trying to, to manipulate you with bad information. Being able to filter these things is very difficult, and I view it like a muscle that needs to be exercised and trained constantly, and not in a way that should be difficult or painful, like some really bad workout at the gym or something, but something that's truly fulfilling. Because when you get to that point where you can be open to any question that you want to learn about and update your view of the universe with a constant curiosity, you're able to answer questions and put richness into your life. I mean, you can walk down the street and understand so many things about what's going on around you, from the smallest blades of grass to why the birds are singing, to why the clouds look the way that they do. And I think it just gives you a completely new and upgraded lens with which to view the world that brings so much more value to it.
So, to what extent would you go to find the answer to a question that you've been thinking about?
So it's like, to what extent, or like how would I do it?
Yeah, how would you how like what would your process be to find the answer to your questions?
I think one of the greatest skills in science is being a little bit humble and understanding that there are always people out there who know something that you don't know, or who know it better than you know.
Yeah.
And I call upon the wisdom of others in every single question that I try to answer, whether that's through Google, which you have to be careful about what wisdom you're finding there, but you learn skills for filtering, kind of like what Carl Sagan used to call the baloney detection kit, figuring out what's real and what's not. But being able to talk to scientists, to be able to read scientific works or books about science. These are the places I turn to constantly. But really, scientific papers too, which are often written in what looks like English, but a different form of English for sure. It's a much harder to understand version. But in my experience, talking to people who know a subject, and asking them to having them teach me, allows me to, if I'm going to teach, especially if I'm going to teach it to someone later, talking to someone like that allows me to put myself in the shoes of the person that I am one day going to teach. What are the questions that I have? What are the things that I don't understand? What are the things that I have where I have misconceptions that need correcting? But more often than not, it is intelligent people who have a story to share, and understanding and accepting that I don't always know the answers. And even if I find the answer and I read it and I feel like I can explain it, it's really, really valuable to be able to run that by another person, whether it's a teacher or an expert, to really, really make sure that it's internalized, and that you really deeply and richly understand it.
Yeah. And do you believe that the economic world rewards curiosity? And would this population have a growing number of curious people, or is it slowly or rapidly decreasing?
I think it is absolutely increasing. Um, I think the economic world, I think it really does value curiosity. I think that there is so much more room for individual expression and individual effort and individual creativity, whether it's in business or in science, that people are working in smaller teams and working in much less rigid and structured environments. And um, there's much more room for entrepreneurial spirit, and so many different places are experiencing the buzz of kind of startup energy of people trying to shake up these long established systems, and all of those are making room for creativity. And I think creativity and curiosity go hand in hand, because when you're trying to create the thing that the light that's guiding the way is curiosity, and that's what's helping you learn and filter information and apply it to the problem that you're trying to answer. um, Now, with with a global media that's driven by attention, we often hear more and more and more about the failures of this. And there have been major failures, whether it's from politics to conspiracy theories to people believing the earth is flat. But the numbers of people who believe these things and who have these challenges and these misconceptions has been shrinking over time and continues to shrink. We're just hearing them more. We're hearing the few of them, I think, that exist louder these days, because they're able to, they have the same wonderful platforms that we all do to express themselves, and it makes it feel very loud. But all in all, across the world, across the human experience, people know more today than even 30 or 40 years ago. To imagine that so many people on earth would have access to the kind of information that they do. How many millions of people have been able to see videos and images from a new robot on Mars? Like, sure, in the US, but that being able to penetrate worldwide and to inspire people on a scale that I don't think we've seen ever. So I think we're really moving in the right direction. And young people too have access to more information and more teachers. And um, just last night, as part of research for a video, I downloaded the original letter written by Isaac Newton to Robert Hooke, where they were trying to figure out some early problem about gravity. Like, just two people chatting with each other the way that people do over email today. And it hit me that how amazing it was to have access to this information. And it wasn't something special that I have access to. Anyone can go find this. Like, the idea that any human being on earth with an internet connection can go read an original letter from Isaac Newton in his handwriting, and learn about his pathway to discovering the answer to a problem. The fact that we have that ability tells me things are in a very good place, as long as we continue to give people the right tools and skills to filter and find and use that information.
Yeah. And when you're making your videos, do you have a typical audience in mind?
So I do try to aim my videos at a young audience that is perhaps learning subjects for the first time, or who has heard about them perhaps but hasn't fully dug deeply into the question. But I do purposely target my videos at a very broad age group, to where I guess over time I've tried to target at different age groups, and always finding that someone that I didn't expect was getting something out of the videos, and sitting back and asking myself why, and and I began to realize that I like to approach things like an onion, with layers. And I think the best stories about science have these layers, where people from different levels of experience can all find something of value there. So just yesterday on Instagram, a parent sent me a video of her 5-year-old daughter watching one of my videos, pre-kindergarten, and definitely experiences these questions for the very first time. But it shows you that you can't underestimate the ability of children to be able to find answers to these questions and see the value. Now, granted, there might be other parts in a video, as the complexity builds and we dive deeper into the story, that somebody that age might not be able to get. But then I get stories from people who are professional scientists in their field and saying, I've never heard it explained quite so clearly, or this really helped me, I'm going to use this in my classes because it's going to help me explain it to my own students, or help me think about my field in a different way. And these are people who have thought about that problem 100 times. So being able to, I think it's a great way, a great skill to use stories to build them in layers that way, to say that there's something here for people of all levels, because it even allows you to come back to the same story repeatedly and say, today I got to this layer. Tomorrow I want to figure out what the next layer is, and dig deeper and deeper, because that's how the scientific process works. It's never a finished destination, right? You always have another layer to peel back and continue to explore.
Yeah. So converting complex scientific explanations into a simpler um, explanation to appeal to a wider audience is a very difficult task to do. So what is your process behind converting it into a simple explanation?
So I think in stories, and I don't know if it's if people are very clear about that. There's so many ways to explain things, but I try to use the power of telling stories, and that means involving characters and small narratives where something is happening to someone, whether it's an animated character or something like that. Humor, uh, looking at retelling something from history, so that there's action, and then people kind of devote some emotion to it, so they're invested in it in a way. So I do that on the broad scale, but I also I imagine different versions and ages of myself. Many writers try to have a person in mind when they write. They try to picture explaining it to, and some science writers will tell you to imagine you're talking to your grandmother. Imagine you're explaining it to your parents or your best friend, and all of these can work for different people. And since my mission is to teach, I try to imagine the past versions of myself, where I can say, what would I have wanted to know when I was learning this for the first time? Where did I make a mistake that I want to prevent someone else from making? And what can I remember, and what would resonate with me, that I hope and hopefully will resonate with other people. So I'm constantly picturing a younger versions of myself in there, and that has been successful, because it shows you that the questions that you have in your life are not unique to you, and that it can feel very scary and it almost give you anxiety to feel like you don't understand something. That why do I have this question? I must be dumb. I must not be able to figure out this problem. But you don't realize that everyone around you has those same voices in their head that are doubting their understanding and trying, they're trying to hold them back from breaking through. And that's a difficult thing to do, to practice over time. But when you realize that everyone has the same questions as you, I think it's a really powerful moment to give you strength and pride in what you're doing, and confidence. And so when I imagine that younger version of myself, and seeing that people have had the same questions in my videos as I had as a younger person, I think it shows people that anybody can understand these topics.